And Mike Ertel is our guest. You'll recognize him. He is now the host of the podcast Bearing Scars. First of all, Mike, good to see you. It's been a while. Great to have you in.
Thanks for having me in.
I want to talk about the podcast. And for people that don't know, I want to talk about your history. You were Seminole County Supervisor of Elections, very well known, very respected. You get the career opportunity of a lifetime. When Governor DeSantis gets nominated for governor, he names you as Secretary of State.
Right.
Then what happens?
Well, it was one of the biggest time frames in my life as a positive as well as a negative.
Yeah.
You know, I've always told people and my kids, life is about chutes and ladders. You know, you climb, you climb, you climb, you climb, and then sometimes you fall down a chute.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. I mean, something from my past, 21 years ago now, actually ended up derailing my entire career as Secretary of State. So I was Secretary of State for all of less than a month.
This was a picture that was years ago, so it was nothing you had done recently.
Right.
It came out, and it was at a time where the PC environment's a little different than it is now. Mm-hmm. And in that situation, when it came out, what were your thoughts? Here you're on this cloud nine, that this is a dream job for me, and then you go through this.
So it's interesting, because one thing that's never been out of style is taking responsibility and accountability for things that you've done. So when I did this thing back in 2005, I took accountability for it, and nobody knew about it, but it didn't mean that I didn't change who I was.
So 11 years later is when this comes out. 14 years later
it came out. But I had accepted responsibility back then. When now clearly it came out when it was a story, and I continue to accept responsibility. And I think that's one of the keys that people need to remember in life, is that we all make mistakes. We all have these, you know, name of the podcast, Bearing Scars. We all have these scars that we bear. It's what you do after you fall off that really defines who you are, because everyone makes mistakes. So in 2005, I make this horrendous, insensitive, no excuses decision. And then what I did for the next 14 years was run elections and be out in the community and try to be a community leader as much as possible.
And can I just say, it did it very well. We work with supervisor elections everywhere, and absolutely as good as it gets. And I think that's why none of us were surprised when Governor DeSantis said, this is my guy.
Right. And so it was the dream job. It was the job. And when it went away, then the question is, what do you do?
Yeah.
You know, what do you do? Do you winnow away? Do you just go away? Well, I do believe that people need to, when something happens in their life, and especially politicians, we see this with politicians all the time, and with actors and with sports folks, they don't know when to get off the stage. Yeah. It was time for me to get off the stage. And, you know, I don't want to be Norma Desmond sticking around waiting for my close-up, so I'm done with politics. But then what do you do? What do you do with your skill set and the things that you know that you have within you to help still continue to better your community? And for years, I've helped people with disabilities. In the past 7 years, helped people with disabilities vote by creating a software program that helps to ensure that polling places are accessible.
I love that.
So we have that throughout the country right now. But what can I do more for one-on-one with people? And that's help people tell their stories, because that's really what it's all about. Is when somebody has a scar, they have to really sometimes just tell their stories to get it out there and unburden themselves with what had been burdening them for so many years. And I think that that's really the important part about this podcast, is you see so many people, and as I'm talking to them, there's tears coming out of their eyes, the men, the women, tears coming out of their eyes, because they're like, I can finally tell somebody, and someone who understands what it's like to have made a colossal mistake in life, take accountability, accept responsibility, and redefine the legacy. And that's what it's
Before
about.
we get into the success of the podcast and some of the stories, and you've got some powerful ones, talk to me about that step when you said going off the stage, when you decided this is the way I want to not only approach my story a little bit, but kind of get back in the public stage. How long was it to put this podcast together when you knew this is exactly what I was going to do?
You know, I was talking to a good friend of mine, and he said to me, he said, Mike, you know, you can't continue to just be in the background. And I said, well, look, I realize that in this environment, me being out in public is sometimes very toxic, especially in this, you know, everything's on the internet forever. Everyone wants to gain political points or, you know, profit from someone else's mistakes. And he said, you have to get out there. And my buddy Chris, he says, you have to get out there and you have to do something that's public, because that's, you know, your story is everybody's story. Everyone's had something like this happen in their life. And I've said for years, everybody has 3 mistakes in their life that they're ashamed of, they don't want anyone to know about, except for maybe Ryan Elijah. But others who are watching have made 3 mistakes they don't want anyone to know about.
Sure.
And I want to create a platform for folks to get it out there and feel good about it and get it off their chest.
Talk about the first episode, and I know you've already taped 2 and you've got some powerful stories. What type people are you bringing on?
Folks that you wouldn't expect. So our first episode was Desmond Meade, who led the amendment.
Great story.
Yeah. He's such a great, he was homeless, he was in prison, got court-martialed and booted out of the Army, and yet he did, he said, I can still do more. I can do something better with my life. Second episode, professional wrestler Matt Morgan, addicted to painkillers, and he said, I can still do more. Our third episode is a woman who has done something that is just tragic. Fourth episode, a man who said, all of our upcoming and current episodes are people who have done something and said to themselves, the American dream does not have a deadline. There is no expiration date for the American dream. And so they can
hard to convince them to speak in some cases, because it's hard sometimes. It's one thing to talk about it with friends and family. To go public with it's a whole other story.
I think what it took really was proof of concept.
Yeah.
And so as people see how the previous guests have handled their interviews and how I've treated them and let them tell their story however they want to tell their story. And that's something that's very powerful for them to be able to do that. And also with the podcast, it's not I'm not a life coach. I'm not out selling anything. All I'm really doing is just letting people tell their stories, getting it off their chest so they can move forward with their lives.
What's been the reaction? I mean, I first found out this on Facebook. We've been friends for a very long time on there. It's a good way to connect with people. When people saw it, when they've seen the first couple, what have been the responses you've heard?
Universal acclaim.
Yeah.
Everyone is like, it's about time. And some were like, it's about time that you did something, Mike, but also it's about time. And like, I got a Facebook message from someone who lives in Alabama. And she said, we weren't Facebook friends.
Yeah.
And she said, heard about it, became Facebook friends. And she said, my son needed this.
Wow.
My son, who's going through something, needed this.
I can imagine how that felt for you.
Yeah, it was. Sorry to hit the microphone. It was very, very impactful for me.
Yeah. You've turned something years ago that was so painful into now helping someone that you didn't even know before.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And as this grows, as this continues to grow, we're helping more people. There, some of our future guests are throughout the country, and there's some big names and some folks that you've never heard of. But you don't have to be famous. You don't have to be a former elected official, an actor, a professional athlete to have a story that can really resonate with someone else who may be listening to it.
I love that. If someone wants to find the podcast, what's the best way to do that?
Best way to do it is go to baringscars.com, and that's got all the links to it. We're available on all of the major podcast platforms. And within that, it also has a section, Tell Us Your Story, because we are looking for more folks to be able to tell their story.
Sure.
And to get this off of their chest.
I'm sure you have big visions. Maybe you just go day by day. How do you look at the future of it right now?
I think the future of it is really not about how I look at it, because right now it's a one-man show. I interview everybody, I do all the editing and the music and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But in the future, it is really less about becoming this gargantuan podcast that makes Theo Von wish he had the numbers, and more about the people who are on that podcast saying, today was a good day. I was able to talk to somebody about what happened, and it's non-judgmental. Or a listener saying, holy cow, I just heard a story of someone that's exactly like my son, my daughter, my nephew. They need to hear this to know that their American dream does not have an expiration date simply because they've done something that they're ashamed of.
I just love that, and I know a lot of people are wanting to see this, and excited to see you back out there. Do you do anything election-wise? I know you're a consultant for a while. Are you still in that a little bit?
A little bit. I've been an expert witness on elections, and I've also, developed a software program that helps to ensure that polling places nationwide are compliant with the ADA requirements, and that's really so that voters who have previously been physically blocked from being able to go into certain polling locations can know that they have the confidence that their city, their county, their state has created the locations for them that are compliant, so they can get into a polling location and vote in the method in which they choose.
It's hard. You've spent your whole life bringing all this knowledge in. It's hard to just turn off that spigot.
Right, exactly.
All of a sudden and not be involved with that day to day, I'm sure.
Exactly. And that's why it's great to continue to be able to do that, to create accessibility for all voters inside a polling location, whereas previously it was at the county level for a very short time, at the state level. Now we're doing it in states and counties throughout the country.
Well, Mike, it's absolutely great to see. And I love it's your first interview that you've done. I know you've had a lot of people saying, I want to hear your story. So we look forward, we want to have you back on, hear about some of these stories, and you can go find the podcast Bearing Scars, but great to see you, my friend.
Great, thank you, Ryan.
Mike Ertel.